Wally's been with the config manager team and SMS team, I think, forever.
Close.
All right.
Yeah.
So welcome, sir.
All right, thank you, Johan. And I understood his last sentence, so if he said anything else bad about me, somebody come tell me during the break, because I don't understand Swedish. I barely understand English, so I apologize. I'm going to be speaking in English, and I'm going to be speaking very fast English. So at any point in time today, you guys have questions, feel free to shout them out. Not sure I'll be able to see if you raise your hands with the lights on, but feel free and ask questions when you have them. As you said, my name is Wally Mead. I'm a program manager with the product group. It says senior up there, and all the senior means is all this gray hair that I have. So I have been with Microsoft for almost 20 years and been in the SMS/configuration manager product line since January 4th, 1994. So I was working at Microsoft in the training group and came back from Christmas holiday and was told I was going to start working on a training course with product support on this new product called Hermes. And if you don't know, Hermes was the code name for SMS 1.0. So that's how long I've been doing the SMS/configuration manager thing. I've been with the product group itself since 2000. So SMS 2.0 timeframe is when I moved from the training group over to the configuration, or the SMS team back then. And right now what I do is I work with 3 different areas. One is community lead, so I kind of help external people like yourselves on the forums or news groups. I help internal resources on our internal discussion aliases and so on. I manage the MVPs for Configuration Manager. Now Johan and Michael aren't MVPs for me. They're in different discipline, but I manage the Configuration Manager MVPs, of which we have 3 of them actually in Sweden. So I manage those, and the third thing I really do is, outside a bunch of presentations like this, is I help support TAP customers. So our TAP customers are corporate customers that take our pre-release products, put them in production, test them out in their production environments, find issues, tell us what works great, what doesn't work, what needs to be changed, et cetera, so that we'll take their feedback, we'll implement it in the product, then we'll release it to you guys at the RTM and general availability, so you can go ahead and deploy the product with good confidence. So, and the reason I mentioned that is I go through my presentations today, I'll weave in a little bit of stuff about what my top customers have seen in some different scenarios. So, anyway, I've got 2 presentations today, application deployment part 1 and part 2. So Johan and I were talking when he invited me to come here to Sweden, which I would love to see something other than dark outside, but not the time of year, I guess, to see anything other than dark when you're here at 8 and leave at 6. But we were talking about the thing most people use in Configuration Manager is software distribution, most commonly used feature of the product. So we thought it'd be great to spend the time talking about the new method of software distribution in Configuration Manager 2012. So that's what I'm going to concentrate on in my presentations. So in part 1, I'm going to give you kind of the groundwork of what software distribution looks like in the 2012 product. And then this afternoon in part 2, I'll come back and I'll get more complex, more advanced in the application model and show you some things that will help out your lives as administrators dramatically. But before I start, what I want to do is start with before I start on the software distribution end of things, I want to start with an overview of what the 2012 product looks like, some of the system requirements, and a little bit of the timeline to get you guys all set, and then we'll jump into software distribution. So first off, this slide, you might have seen this slide or variations of this slide in other conferences, presentations, whatever. And this slide is what I refer to as the pillars of investment. So these are the big buckets of areas where we as a product group invested our time and effort in development to improve this product. So how many of you currently run ConfigMan 2007? Okay, very good percentage of you. Anybody running SMS 2003 yet? Don't be shy, raise your hand if you are. Okay, 1, 2. Anybody running SMS 2.0? Please be shy and don't raise your hand. No SMS 2.0, so good. All right, so what this slide is, for all of you people that are running either SMS 2003 or Configuration Manager 2007, why would you guys invest your time in trying to learn a new product and implement a new product and money to purchase a new product, if you don't have like a software assurance type agreement or whatever, into this new technology called Configuration Manager 2007 or 2012. And if you're not a Microsoft Systems Management customer, why would you consider moving to our platform to manage your environment? So that's really what this slide deck is about. Now I've only given you 1 slide on it. So I'll talk for just a couple of minutes on what these high-level features are, buckets, and then we'll move on from there. So first one is what we call empowering users. And I'm not going to talk a lot about this because really what that is the new software distribution model. And realistically, what it really means to you is it's very easy now for you to assign software to users and have confidence that that software is going to be installed in the appropriate locations and not everywhere. So for example, today if you, in SMS 2003 or ConfigMan 2007, if you were to go and deploy software to Johan, let's say Office 2010, and Johan walks over and logs into his laptop, it's going to install Office 2010. It's not going to check and see if it's there. It's just going to go ahead and install it. Great. Now he walks over to his second laptop, logs in. It's going to do the exact same thing. He walks over to my laptop and logs in. It's going to do the exact same thing. So you can advertise software to users in the current product, but it's hard to control where the application gets installed. There's no way really of assigning the systems that Johan really owns to him. So just, if you make it available to users, anywhere he goes, he gets the software. In ConfigMan 2012, we've changed that technology so that when I make the software available to Johan, we can associate his primary computers with him, and then when he logs onto his computer, we'll install through an MSI. When he logs onto my computer, I don't want him installing his software on my computer, but he still needs his software. So we'll maybe give him a virtual version of Office 2010. He goes out to the hotel kiosk here, no app V integration, they can't install out there. So then maybe he gets a remote desktop version or a Citrix version of the application. He whips out his mobile device and still wants to run Office applications. Maybe there's a Windows Mobile Cab version or a Nokia version of that same application. So making sure the application's available to the user, but presenting it to the user in the proper format, depending upon where he's logging on. So you can control where those installations occur. So that's really what that first column is about, is the new software distribution model, which we'll talk about through the rest of the day. Okay, the second column, the middle one, is on unifying infrastructure. And a couple of different things there, but realistically what that means is we're trying to reduce the cost for you guys to have to expend to manage your environment through Configuration Manager. So how many of you have hierarchies today? Hierarchies being more than one primary site in your environment. So not that many of you? Okay. In the United States, it's very, very common for our customers to have hierarchies. Multiple primary sites or secondary sites in a single environment that transfer data back and forth. It's very expensive for server licenses, for Config Manager server licenses, for OS and server licenses, as well as transmissions across the wire to have a hierarchy. So what we're doing in ConfigMan 2012 is removing a lot of the reasons why you might have hierarchies today and trying to get people to collapse down their hierarchies into as few of number of sites as possible. The three most common reasons people have hierarchies are, number one is scalability. A single primary site can handle up to 100,000 clients. Now, the vast majority of our customers in the world don't have more than 100,000 clients. We have a handful that have more than that. The vast majority of our customers in the 5,000 to 15,000 client range. So they easily could fit within a single primary site. But that's the number one reason. The second reason is I have geographically dispersed pockets of users, offices, that I need to manage. And the WAN links between those two locations, or those multiple locations, are slow enough that I don't want to have clients sitting out in Malmo that are assigned to and communicating with the site systems up here in Stockholm. So instead, I put a child site down in Malmo, and those two communicate. So that's a very common reason. Another common reason is that Johan manages the servers. So he does the server management in my environment. Michael manages the desktops. And Johan doesn't trust Michael to not deploy software updates or applications to his servers and have them rebooted outside of his normal business hours, his maintenance window type hours. So to separate that so Johan feels confident that Michael can't ever touch his server, they set up different primary sites. One primary site for the servers, another primary site for the desktops. The security system in the current product is pretty hard to accomplish that in a single environment. In 2012, our new security system makes it very, very easy for Johan with servers and Michael with desktops to coexist in the same environment, and to them it looks like they have unique environments. So Michael can't see any servers. He can't see the servers, he can't see the server collections, he can't see any applications, software updates, task sequences, OS images, distribution points, whatever that are assigned to the servers. And Johan wouldn't see anything that was created for the desktops. So in their mind, in their administration scope, they think they have separate sites. But we've collapsed them into a single site to reduce the cost and the infrastructure requirements. Another fairly common reason for multiple sites is languages. You want to have your administrators administering their environment in their own language, whether it's French or German or Spanish or Japanese, whatever. So you have different versions of the product. Well, now in 2012, the product is all Unicode-based, so it's language neutral. So all the sites have the same language on them, but now what we have are language packs that you can install that will display the console in a localized language, in Spanish or German or French. And for clients, we have client packs that will then display the client user interface in the appropriate language. But I don't have to have separate sites for those different languages, just appropriate language packs that will install on top of English or language neutral, and it will go ahead and display the console in appropriate languages. We're moving to SQL Server replication between sites. So what that means is we're using SQL Server to transfer data between child sites and parent sites to child sites. Makes the transfer quicker, more easy to troubleshoot, so less problems with it, and it reduces the processing requirements of sites. It only has to be processed at one site, then direct SQL Server insertions into the parent site's database or the child site's database. So a lot of things there to help reduce your infrastructure to make your environment smaller and less costly for you. A couple other things there, security and compliance. We've changed our security system again for the servers versus desktop scenarios. We've also improved software updates. So now you can go ahead and have automatic deployment of your updates. So a lot of people, if they use patch management and configuration manager, they complain that WSUS is easier. Because in WSUS, I can create an automatic approval rule, and it deploys the updates automatically. In Config Manager, you can't. You have to go in there on a monthly basis, select your updates, run the DSUW, and then pick the updates you want to deploy and deploy them. In 2012, we basically have automatic approval rules from WSUS. So now I can create an automatic deployment rule, as we call it, that says every month when you see this type of an update from this vendor, this classification, this product, go ahead and automatically deploy it for me. So again, making your life easier. We've also now integrated with Microsoft System Center Endpoint Protection, or what you guys know as FEP, Forefront Endpoint Protection. It's now part of Configuration Manager 2012. It's built into the product, not a separate download, no separate collections or packages or advertisements. It looks just like a feature of the product. It uses policies just like you would for software distribution or normal software updates. So very, very tightly integrated with the product now. No separate database or anything. In the last column, which is listed as simplify the administration, some of the areas there that help you out are, it's really to make your day-to-day jobs easier in managing your environment. So less costly in the middle, easier on the right-hand side. And that gets into the new admin console. So you'll see that in my demos coming up. We've gotten rid of the MMC console, which doesn't make anybody upset at all. So we've gotten rid of the MMC. It's now a common System Center framework. So it looks very much like the other System Center products. So you're already familiar with it if you use Operations Manager or any other System Center products. The console self-renders itself. So if I make Johan administrator and configuration manager, and all he's assigned to do is software updates, when he logs on, the console removes everything that has nothing to do with software updates automatically. I didn't have to create anything, no new MMC consoles. I just said, Johan is the administrator, software update role, here's the collections he has access to, here's the security scope, the server versus desktop type scenario. And then when he logs on, we remove everything he shouldn't see. The reports, there's 427 reports in the release candidate version I'll show you. He would see the 36 reports that are built in for software updates and nothing else. So we automatically render the console based on who's logged on, what security roles, scopes, and attributes they have. Again, making life easier as administrator. A couple other things that you guys spend a lot of time on right today is client health. The number one problem that our administrators have is that they spend a lot of their time fixing client functions. The client's broken, it's not communicating with the site. And the most common problem is Windows Management Instrumentation, WMI. WMI is busted. So back to the TAP scenario, I manage 3 different TAP customers. And I've talked to them, and in their ConfigMan 2007 environment, they state that they're happy if they can get their current client percentage of healthy clients between the 80 and 85% range. So they figure if they can deploy new software updates and get 85% of their clients installing them within whatever their SLA is, 3 days, a week, whatever time frame is, they're happy. And that 85% to get there takes them a lot of time because they're out there constantly fixing client problems. Well, in the ConfigMan 2012 product, we've removed all that complexity for you. On a daily basis, each client does a health check for 21 different items. And if any one of those 21 different items is broken or not returned as healthy, we automatically repair it for you, including WMI. So we'll repair WMI if it's busted. So in the TAP program, those 3 customers I work with, again, they're 80 to 85% in the current product. In the 2012 product, without any effort on their part other than installing 2012, they're in the 95 to 97% healthy range. So they can take all that extra time that was devoted to getting their 85% healthy clients and now use it to actually administer and use the product because of that self-healing feature that we have. Another part in there that we have is we have a feature in the product called Desired Configuration Management. And probably not a lot of you use it, primarily because all it can do is tell you where you're out of compliance, but it can't fix it. In the 2012 product, not only can we tell you when a computer's out of compliance, we can put it back into compliance for you automatically. So a lot of things in there to help make your lives easier as administrator. So those are the 3 different buckets or pillars of investment, as we call them. Empowering users, which really means the new software distribution model. Simplifying or unifying your infrastructure, making it less costly, flattening your hierarchy, and so on. And then making your lives easier, administrator, with simplifying the administration. Okay, so now, as you guys start playing around with the release candidate version, or as you start preparing for the RTM version of the product, so as you know, release candidate's out there now. We released it just over a month or so ago. Oh, no, we're in December now. Happy December 1st. So it's been a little over a month now we've released the release candidate version. If you're going to download that and play around with it, which we highly encourage you to do, play around with it in your lab environments, to do that, or as you're preparing for RTM, here are the requirements you need to look at. And the 2 biggest things to look at and know are the site servers and all roles now require 64-bit version of Windows Server 2008. So your server-based operating system for all of your site systems is now 64-bit version of Windows Server 2008. ConfigMan 2012 is now a native 64-bit application. So no more 32-bit app running on 64-bit hardware. So if you're purchasing new hardware, 64-bit hardware, 64-bit OS. And then SQL Server also, we require now SQL Server 2008, 64-bit. So you're getting new version of SQL Server, and it has to be 64-bit as well. The one caveat you have today, if you guys start playing around with the release candidate version, is we only support the top version of SQL Server today, which is SQL Server 2008 SP2 with Cumulative Update 6 and a SQL Server hotfix. And that SQL Server hotfix is up there, 2603910. Very, very shortly, we should be announcing support for SQL Server 2008 R2, 64-bit, and it will require Service Pack 1 with CU3, Cumulative Update 3, and that same hotfix. The hotfix for R2 came out quite a bit later than the hotfix for SP2, so it's taking us longer to verify that it fixes the problem that they have. So we should be announcing that support very shortly. So today, if you try playing around with the release candidate version of Configuration Manager 2012, it's SQL Server 2008, SP2, CU6 with the hotfix. By the time we get to RTM, we'll certainly be supporting the SQL 2008 R2 scenario, but not today. Okay, then the other thing to be aware of is the only 32-bit site system we support are 32-bit distribution points. So we will support a 32-bit distribution point even back to Windows Vista as an operating system or Windows Server 2003. All other site system roles fit in that top row, which is 64-bit Windows Server 2008. Your management points, your state migration points, your fallback status points, software update points, and everything else. 64-bit version of Windows Server 2008. And then we list the client versions. We've gotten rid of the Windows 2000 client support and the admin console supported versions. Okay, so that's as you're preparing or playing around or preparing for the future. And lastly, before we jump into software distribution, Other things that you guys can do today to get ready for the future, flatten your hierarchy. That shouldn't be a problem because most of you don't have hierarchies. But if you do have a hierarchy, look to see where you can get rid of sites and collapse sites together. So start doing that investigation and start preparing for that. Next thing would be to look at the 64-bit version of the OS and SQL Server. So make sure you're looking at the current operating system and current SQL Server versions. So any new purchases, you're going that way. If you want, you can start implementing branch cache. Branch cache is supported in ConfigMan 2012. It's also supported in ConfigMan 2007 SP2. And branch cache is technology that can help you not have to put ConfigMan distribution points or secondary sites in remote locations and utilize the client operating system Windows 7 to go ahead and be a pseudo distribution point in a remote location. Start looking at SQL Server reporting services. In ConfigMan 2012, that's the only reporting engine we have, is SRS. So all reporting is done out of SRS now. So if you're not familiar with it, install ConfigMan 2007 R2 or R3. Both of those have integration with SRS. So start setting up SRS, integrating it with your current product, getting familiar with it so that when you move to the new version of the product, you know how to use SRS and you know how to do reporting with it. And the last two bullets up there, they're bullets related to migration. I didn't have a slide in here on migration, but just to let you know, there is no in-place upgrade from ConfigMan 2007 to ConfigMan 2012. It's a side-by-side migration. So you're going to have your 2007 infrastructure that you already have today. And for those of you that raised your hand on SMS 2003, sorry, there's no upgrade at all from SMS 2003. You have to upgrade to ConfigMan 2007 and then do the ConfigMan 2007 to ConfigMan 2012 migration. Anyway, you have your 2007 site that you have today. You stand up a brand new 2012 environment. So you have parallel infrastructures. And then in our console in ConfigMan 2012, we have specific migration technology. So you'll point your 2012 site server to your 2007 site server. We'll discover all the objects you have there, collections, packages, advertisements, software update stuff, OS deployment stuff, configuration baselines, configuration items, and all those different objects you have. We'll discover those, and we'll let you migrate over whichever one of those objects you want over to the 2012 environment. So we give you in-console tools to do that side-by-side migration, where we didn't give you that in previous versions. So it's a very, very simple, easy migration process. But so those last two bullets up on the slide are talking about issues or caveats with migration. The next to bottom one says, avoid mixing users and devices in single collections. So in 2007, I can create a collection that has a membership rule for computers and a membership rule for users or user groups, and that's supported. It's not supported in 2012. So as you migrate over those collections, we actually won't migrate over any collections that have those mixed membership rules. And we'll actually tell you in the console, I couldn't migrate over these collections because of, and it will tell you that you have mixed membership rules. So if you have those today, break those apart into two separate collections. And the bottom one is, when you migrate over your packages from ConfigMan 2007 to ConfigMan 2012, we migrate them intact, the way they are now. So if in 2007 your package source file says d:/my_app, when you migrate that package over to 2012, it's going to say d:/my_app. And since you're on a different server, the physical different server box, d:/my_app is probably not going to be valid for you. So change your package source locations over to UNCs so that the UNC is still valid when you migrate the package over. Okay? So that's it as far as the overview stuff. Any questions there before I move on? And please feel free to ask if you have them. So the question is, he's running SMS 2003 and we don't support it. Upgrade from SMS 2003 to ConfigMan 2007. He has to do that interim step of ConfigMan 2007. And will we provide licensing for that? And I'm not a licensing person because that's marketing stuff, and I stay away from marketing as far as possible. But I would guess the answer is no, that we would not provide you a transitional license for ConfigMan 2007 to get there. That's my guess, but I don't know if marketing has provided any sequence for that or not. my assumption would be no, because SMS 2003 has been out of mainstream support for almost a year now, or maybe more than that. So my guess would be not, that there shouldn't be people still running SMS 2003. Although, when I was in Copenhagen last month, there was still a person running SMS 2.0, so that's why I have to ask. And they came up after the event and told me, you should have asked about that, because we have one. So my guess is no, but I don't have a solid answer for you, but that would be a marketing thing. Yeah. Yep. Anything else? Okay. And I'll be around here all day until we fly out sometime tonight. So when I'm not talking on stage, you can hit me during breaks or lunch or whatever, ask other questions. Okay, so now with the real topic for today, for the next couple of hours I have, not 2 hours right now, but the rest of this hour and then the this afternoon session, is on the new software distribution technology in ConfigMan 2012. So we're going to talk about packages and we're going to talk about applications, and two different things. We're going to compare the two. So we'll spend some time with the basics of it in the first part, and the second part we'll talk about global conditions and expressions. We'll talk about user device affinity. We'll talk about applications uninstalls as well as application supersedence. So we're only going to get through the first bullet in this first presentation. I'll get the other ones in the afternoon session. Okay, so these are all the new features of Configuration Manager 2012 software distribution. So quite a few changes. Just this lets you have some comfort level. I'm assuming all of you running Config Manager or SMS are doing software distribution. So you know packages, you know programs, you know collections, you know advertisements. So you create a package which defines your source files. You create at least one program, if not multiple programs, to say here's what to do with those source files. You then take a program from the package, you advertise it to a collection. So you guys all know that stuff. You can do the exact same thing in ConfigMan 2012. You can create a package, you can create programs for it, you have collections, and then you can deploy, or what you guys know as an advertisement, you can deploy a program from a package to members of a collection. So you can do the exact same thing. But all the stuff I'm talking about on this slide and throughout the rest of the day is only about the new application model, so you get none of these benefits with the package and program scenario, which we still have in ConfigMan 2012. So first off for you, the application models, where we're going to talk about. So today, what you guys do is, again, you create a package, you create one or more programs, and then you advertise one program from that package out to your users. But you have to determine which program from the package to advertise to which collection of users. That's complexity on your part. You don't know exactly how this one user, Johan, wants his application. In ConfigMan 2012, you don't do that anymore. Again, you can if you want to create packages and programs. But in the application model, you model an application. Let's say Office 2010. I create Office 2010 as an app. And then inside that, I create deployment types. And deployment types are deployment technologies. I might have a deployment type for MSI. I might have a deployment type for an app V installation. I might have a deployment type for a Windows Mobile Cab version. I might have a second MSI deployment type with a different command line. So I create my application, I create my deployment types, which are very much like your programs. But now when I deploy the software, I don't pick the deployment type, i.e. program, to assign or advertise to Johan. I say, give Johan Office 2010. Configuration Manager client determines which deployment type, which program, as you guys would know it, is to be run on his computer. And we do that through these things called installation requirements, detection methods, and dependencies. So it makes my life easier because I don't have to figure out which program to advertise. I just say, make this application available, and the client figures out how to install it. Now, again, the way we do that is by these installation requirement rules. Today, what you guys do is you guys create this complex set of collections. And your collections have these query rules on them. Your computer is a member of this collection if it has this much memory, this much disk space, this much processor. You're a member of this group, or OU. You don't already have this software installed, or you have some other software installed. And that's a collection you create. So you have a bunch of these collections, probably one per application, with all the rules looking for it and saying the application is not installed. The problem is twofold in that. One is that collections are evaluated on the server. So it's very expensive in CPU and processing on the server to create collections and process them. Requirement rules are processed on the client. So the client determines if it has enough memory, has enough disk space, has the application installed, etc. So no server processing on that. And the second thing is your collection rules generally were relying on hardware inventory information, which could be out of date. The computer could physically be turned off because the end user's on holiday. The computer could be broken. The computer may have not sent in hardware inventory for a reason. Maybe the inventory file's too big and we couldn't process it. So a computer might be in a collection that it shouldn't be in, so it might be receiving software that really shouldn't be targeted to it, or it might not be in a collection that it should be in because the hardware inventory is out of date and is not getting software that should be. Again, these are evaluated on the client, no reliance on hardware inventory. It's direct queries on the client to run those. So I put the requirement rules on the deployment type of that application. And then we have what we call detection methods. So I mentioned that scenario earlier that when I advertised Office 2010 to Johan, every computer he logs into, it installs it. It doesn't check to see if it's already there. 2012 will check to see, is Office 2010 already installed? If so, no sense me installing it again. No sense bringing it across the wire, accessing the DP, accessing the network, filling up client cache, and rerunning an installation for something that's already there. So we have detection methods built in. Then we have dependencies. If I'm going to deploy a virtual version of an application, that's not going to work unless the AppV client is installed first. So you can't run an AppV application without the AppV client being installed. So I would make the AppV client a dependent application for a virtual deployment type, an AppV deployment type. So now when I deploy the application, if it's determined through the requirement rules that Johan should run the AppV version of the application, because he's not on his computer, he's on Wally's computer, it's going to check to see, is the AppV client here already? If not, it's going to go ahead and install the AppV client automatically. It's an application, so it'll check its requirement rules. Can it install there? Check its detection method. Is it already installed? Its dependencies. Maybe AppV client requires something else. So, and we have great chaining or dependency chains in that. So, very cool. Application supersedence. This is the ability of replacing one application with another one. So you have Internet Explorer 8 today, Internet Explorer 9's out, you want to automatically replace all references with IE8 from IE8 to IE9. We can do that for you in our code. Application uninstalls. Maybe you have a license for a piece of software from manufacturer ABC, and your licenses are expiring, and you're not going to renew them. You're going to get the same type of application from vendor XYZ. So you can now tell us to go ahead and uninstall ABC's application, and we can go ahead and do that for you, whether we install the application or not. You just have to tell us what the application is, how to determine whether it's installed or not, and then how to uninstall it. And then you can just deploy an uninstall action out to your ConfigMan clients and we'll remove it. Whether Johan installed the software from home or whether it got installed through ConfigManager or SMS or it's in your build image or whatever the case is. We can go ahead and manage that for you. So we have the complete life cycle of your application management now. Applications are also state-based, which means if I state this application is required, or what you guys know is mandatory, and it gets installed in Johan's computer, he then uninstalls it from his local computer. He doesn't want it. Because I'm the admin and I said it's required, it's going to get reinstalled automatically. Or in the uninstall scenario, Johan brings in his software from home, I find it, I don't want it installed on my corporate PC, I create an uninstall application for it and deploy it to his computer, it uninstalls. He wants it back, he reinstalls it, well my uninstall is going to take priority, I'm going to uninstall it again. And eventually one of the two of us should give up, and it's not going to be me. So it's better be him. Otherwise, he's going to spend all of his time keep reinstalling his application or keep uninstalling what I gave to him. So we're state-based now, which is not the way in the existing product. User device affinity is the way that we tie Johan to his computers so that we know through requirement rules when he can install through an MSI. And Johan can have a single computer assigned to him. He has two computers here, so he can be one user to multiple computers. Or maybe it's a shared desktop scenario where multiple users are sharing a single computer. And there's like 8 different ways I can set that relationship between the user and the system. So I can use that user device affinity as a requirement rule. We have a unified monitoring experience, which you'll see in a number of the different demos I'm doing today, where you go to one place in the console, you can see all your deployments, you can see all of your package content and what the status is of all those. And I'll show you that. End user experience, if I ask you to raise your hand if you like run advertised programs as a way to install applications today, I bet none of you raise your hand. We've gotten rid of it in 2012. We've replaced it with 2 things. One is the Software Center, which is kind of a direct replacement for run advertised programs, really targeted for system applications. But for those applications you make available to users, then we have this application catalog, which is a website that users can browse to, find a listing of all the applications they have access to, and pick which ones they want from the website and install from the website. And it goes through all these other things with requirement rules and detection methods and dependencies and so on. And I'll show you that at the end of the day today. And then content management, basically distribution points. We made a bunch of changes in DPs to make your content management much more effective for you. A content library versus the SMS PKG $C$ share that you know today. Single instance store, which means a single file. If it's in multiple packages, it's only stored once in your DP. It's only copied once across the wire, and we know where the references are for the other packages. Intelligent distribution point groups, which means if I put 5 pieces of content on a DP group, I add a new DP to that DP group, it gets all the content that was already distributed to that DP group. So we remember that. It's state-based. Content validation, we can have a scheduled process that will validate all the content on each DP, checking the hashes and signatures. If anything's corrupt, we'll notify you in the console, hey, this application's not good on this DP, and you can do a redistribution of that application, that content. Alrighty. Okay, so here's a comparison between what you guys know today in the middle column with ConfigMan 2007, which is in essence the same as SMS 2003, and with the new technology as the new terminology. So you guys create packages and programs, as we already stated. A package is now replaced with an application, and what you know as a program is now a deployment type, a command line to run with the application source files. You advertise software today. In the new world, you deploy it. You even deploy a package and program. You don't advertise anymore. So advertisement's gone away, just been renamed to deployment. Your targeting is still by collections, so you still target to collections. However, your rules are server-based in the current product, and they're client-based through requirement rules. So it's the client that evaluates, can I run this deployment type or not? User targeting, it's very limited in ConfigMan 2007. That's the scenario with I target to Johan. Everywhere he goes, he installs the software. Now with the user device affinity, we can prevent him from installing on other computers other than his own computer, but still give him the application in a device-held version or an app V version or Citrix or remote desktop type application. Client user interface, again, we removed run advertised programs, replaced it with Software Center, and then we now have the new internet-based portal, so a website you can go to get applications. And then much greater content management with the content library, single instance store, content validation, DP groups, the ability to associate with collections and so on. We'll talk about later on. Okay, let me show you a quick demo on classic software distribution. Classic software distribution means the stuff you guys know today. So I'm just showing you that it's still there. So this is the new console. You can see it doesn't look like the old stuff. It's not MMC based. I'm going to go to the software library, which is where I go to deploy software. So just real quickly in the workspaces, assets and compliance, that's where I see the users I've discovered, the devices I'm managing. I look at my asset inventory, asset intelligence. I create software metering rules if I want to do that. Compliance settings is DCM on steroids. So it's DCM with that automatic remediation. And then endpoint protection. That's where I create my policies for endpoint protection. Software library is where I go to deploy software to computers or users. Applications, packages, software updates, and operating system images. Monitoring is where I go to see the status of all this stuff. So that's reporting, that's alerts, that's queries, that's my replication status between sites, that's my status of endpoint protection, and so on. And then administration is where I go to configure my infrastructure, my sites, my site systems, my security roles, my boundaries, and so on. So we're going to go to software library because I want to deploy some software. And here you see applications or software distribution, software updates, and operating systems. I'm going to go to application management, and I'm going to go to packages. So the packages node here is the classic stuff for which you guys know from SMS 2003 or ConfigMan 2007. There's a couple of them built in the release candidate version. Just ignore them for now. I'm going to go ahead and create a new package. I'm going to create one from definition. You guys do this today a lot in the current product. So I'll just use the create package from definition wizard. I'm going to browse to an MSI, which is very commonly done today. And I'm going to browse. Come on, browse. There we go. I've noticed that the power in Sweden is a little bit slower than the power in the US. So my laptop runs slower than it normally does. Oh, I'm typing in Sweden there. I can't talk and type at the same time. I apologize. Primary one is my server, lab files. I'm going to take this application called Microsoft Math. I'm going to pick the MSI file, exactly what you guys would do today. I'm going to say it has source files and get the source files from the source folder always. I'm going to go to this UNC path. Here's where my source files are. And it's going to go ahead and create my package from definition. Now you see it in my console. You see that it says it has 6 programs, the exact same 6 programs you would get today in ConfigMgr 2007 if you imported an MSI. There they are. Now I want to go ahead and deploy that, or what you guys know as advertise. So I'll take the per system unattended program, and I'm just going to go ahead and say deploy. And I'm just going to run through this wizard real quick just to show you that we can do so. I'm going to deploy to all my clients, my desktops and server clients. But cool thing is, notice that we tell you the memory count in your collection. So no longer can your dumb admin say at the end of a distribution to everybody, he can't say, I didn't know there were 10,000 computers in that collection, because he saw it right here. So he had to have seen how many members were in the collection. Now, he may not be able to understand what the number means. He may not be able to read, but it was there on the screen. So we show you that. So there's 2 members I'm going to be targeting. I have to put my content on a distribution point, so I'm going to go ahead and put it on my 1 DP I have. I could pre-deploy the content to the distribution point, but I'm doing it with one wizard. I'm going to make this required as opposed to available. So what you guys know is required is you guys know is mandatory. Available is what you guys know is optional. So I'm going to make this an optional or available advertisement. So it's an available deployment. Scheduling, I want it to be available right now, so I'll leave that. User experience, I don't have to worry about maintenance windows at all. Distribution points, go ahead and download from DP, that's fine. And now here, again, we show you the count, 2 computers. So he's seen it again, how many computers he's targeting. And then the same thing on the summary, or completion wizard, member count 2. So he's seen it 3 times. So again, he can't fake it anymore. All right, so now I've got this deployment, which basically is an advertisement. My content is on my distribution point. So if I go to monitoring, go to distribution status, click the right node there, and content status, we'll see the content right here, Microsoft Math. You'll see it says 100% compliant. It's on my 1 DP I've targeted to. Now we just go to my client computer, sitting right here, retrieve policies. And I don't have to retrieve policies in production, as you guys know. I'm just doing it to speed things up. But it would happen sometime within the next hour. And momentarily, down right above the system tray, I'll get a balloon down there saying, right there it is, new software is available. I didn't make it mandatory, otherwise it or required it would install automatically. So I wanted to show you the new software center. So it's available or optional program. So this is the replacement for run advertised programs. And it's going to pop up and let me pick the application, or in this case, package I want to go ahead and deploy, and let me install that application. Or again, in this case, it's package content. And again, your Swedish power is killing me here. At least it's not Estonia. When I was in Estonia last month, both my computers crashed on me. So I really didn't like that power. So I haven't had any crashing problems so far. So here's the replacement for run advertised programs. It shows me I have some content available to me. I can go and view everything by default, applications, which is software distribution, OSD, or software updates. And this happens to be an optional software. Otherwise, if I was not looking at that, I wouldn't see it. I want to look at required stuff. It says it's available. I'm going to go ahead and click install. And now just watch the status here. It's going to say downloading. It says preparing download, and now it says downloading in some percentage. So it tells you exactly what's happening in the process. And when it's all done, it will, once it's done downloading, kick directly over to installing. It'll install the application. It'll take it a moment, and then it'll go ahead and report in status saying I've deployed this piece of software. I could make this, and there's my balloon saying I'm all done with the installation. I could make this required, and the end user wouldn't see a thing if I wanted to. But there's the application on the desktop. So That's what we call classic software distribution. It's still there. You guys can still go ahead and use it if you want to. But where we want you to go now is the new application model, is where we want you to spend the rest of your time. We leave packages and programs in there for 3 reasons. One is familiarity. You guys know how to do software distribution today. So this is easy transition for you. So you can get the product installed, and you can still do your software distribution while you're learning the rest of the product. 2, for migration. When you migrate from 2007 to 2012, we migrate your packages over as packages. So they're still there the way you know them. And thirdly is there's some software that doesn't lend itself to being an application. An application is software that you can identify how it installs and whether it's installed or not. A batch file, for example, or a VB script, that's not an application. It's going to do some stuff through your script. So that stay as a package and program. But for the application model, you as the administrator, you get define a bunch of stuff for your application. So you're going to define some administrative properties which allow you to classify your software, to search for it in the console, and so on. Oops. You're going to specify end-user metadata. End-user metadata is what's going to appear in the application catalog when the users browse for software through the website. And I'll show you that later on today. Then you're going to specify your deployment type. And on the left-hand side are the 4 different deployment types: virtual, script, physical, MSI, Windows Installer Base, and mobile cab. So either Windows Mobile or Nokia. So you specify your deployment type, and in the deployment type, it includes requirement rules. Can I run this deployment type or not? Do I have enough memory, enough disk space? Am I the logged on user, primary device type stuff? So I configure all those requirement rules, what you're doing today in collections. Then, dependencies. Does this application require something else before it can run? I designate what those are. Detection method. How do I tell if the application's already installed? Windows installer product code, or some registry, or some file setting, whatever. And then my command line. What command do I run to install or run this deployment type? So that's the MSI exec in the Windows installer type scenario. And then lastly is the content, the package source files as you would know them. So I specify all those things for my deployment type. Now, a little more detail, and then we'll go create an application. Detection methods. Detection methods are how you determine whether or not an application is installed. There's no sense having us reinstall something that's already there. Today, we don't check that. So you guys build that into your collections. You say, I get this software if my collection says you don't already have that software installed. But you have to build those rules into your collections, or you create a wrapper program that would then go identify your application on your own. We now have this built into Configuration Manager 2012, so you guys don't have to do that. Just tell us how to tell whether the application is installed or not. MSI, registry, file system, some custom script you want to run. A combination of all those, if you wish. And then if we determine the application is installed based on the detection methods, no sense us redeploying it. So we won't. You can create enhanced detection methods, which give you the ability of integrating multiple different types of detection. So maybe Johan brings in Office 2010 from home and installs it. So we could detect that through the MSI product code. But maybe in your environment, for your corporate install of Office 2010, you have a custom template file that has to be installed locally. And he doesn't have it in his environment because he brought his software from home. So it wasn't deployed through a corporate scenario. Or maybe you have custom registry keys or WMI settings. Or it has to be a specific version, like maybe a patched version, so you're looking for a file version or file size, date and time, whatever. So you can go ahead and create additional detection methods to fine-tune that identification. So now when we see that Johan already has the software installed, yeah, it's there, but it doesn't meet your corporate requirements, so you want to go ahead and redeploy it with your corporate template or your custom settings in the registry. And I'll show you how you can create those later on. Requirement rules, those are those collection queries that you create. You're putting them now in your application deployment types. Memory, disk space, and so on. And we'll go through what those look like later on this afternoon. You put rules on each deployment type. And that's how we dictate which deployment type you run from the application. That's why you don't have to any longer determine which program to advertise. You just say, advertise the package, which again is an application, and it's a deployment, I know. But, and then we figure out on the client which deployment type, which command line to run based on your requirement rules on the deployment types. Evaluated real time on the client, and evaluated before any content is downloaded. In today's product, you would download all the content from the DP, put it in local client cache, then you try and run the program. Now, with this requirement rules, we evaluate this in the client first. If it passes the requirement rules and we determine it's not already installed, then we'll go ahead and download the content in the cache and try and run the application. And then lastly, oh, go ahead. Okay, so the question is, if I have multiple MSI deployment types with rules, how do I determine which one it runs? I'll show you that this afternoon when we create multiple deployment types, but there's going to be a priority. We're going to check the first deployment type you have, priority 1. We're going to see, can I run that one based on your rules? If so, we're going to run it. If that one fails, the requirements aren't met, we're going to go to the next deployment type and look at its rules. So you're going to have unique rules that would identify exactly when you could run either of them. If they both would evaluate, it's whichever one evaluates first, which would be priority 1. And you'll see that this afternoon. Dependencies are additional applications that have to be installed before this one could be installed. The example I'm going to show you this afternoon is app v. I'm going to deploy a virtual version of an application, but it can't run it until the app v client's installed. So I'll make the app v client a dependency for the virtual application deployment type. You can have as many dependencies as you want to, and we'll evaluate them in the order that they're listed. We can do anding, or we can do ORing of those. So you can say you require .NET Framework 3.5 or 4.0, or we require IE7 or IE8. And if neither of them is present, then go ahead and install IE8. So you can specify what your dependencies are, and then if they're required both of them or two different versions, it doesn't matter which one. The important thing is dependencies are applications. So they have to be added to our console as applications that are modeled in the application model, then you can add them as dependencies. And again, I'll show you that this afternoon. Okay, let me show you creating a very, very simple application. Oops, not client, sorry. I want the site server. So let's go back to the software library. Now we're going to go up to applications. There are no applications built into the product by default. So I'm going to go ahead and say create application. And this will launch off a wizard. Looks fairly similar to the create package from definition wizard. One of the nice things we've done, all the wizards have the same look and feel now. So once you've seen one wizard, you know how the rest of them are all going to act. There's different pages will pop up depending upon what you're doing. And then, there we go. When the power kicks in, we will go ahead, and here are the different types of applications you can create from the start. Windows installer, MSI based, app v, so a sequenced application, Windows mobile cab, so for a Windows mobile file, and then Nokia SIS file, because we're supporting Nokia Symbian clients with our product as well. So I'm going to go ahead and take Windows installer. You have to specify a UNC path to where your file is you want to import. You can't use local path anymore for applications. So I'm going to take DCM tools. And my scenario is I'm going to install in the first session DCM tools as an application. In the part 2 this afternoon, I'm going to supersede DCM tools with another application and have it uninstall DCM tools automatically. And here you can see, as part of this import process, we went ahead and identified the product code. So we identified the Windows installer product code, which is important. That's my detection method. So we automatically figured out how to determine whether this application is installed or not based out of the MSI. And I'll just go ahead and say this is a Microsoft application. It's version 4.0. Here's my one command line. We don't create the 6 different programs that you saw with the package when you import a package definition from an MSI. We create one deployment type with one MSI command line in this case. And that's what happens to be. It happens to be a silent install. If I want to do an attended install, I create another deployment type and just get rid of the /q on here, or whatever other parameters I want to use. And then down at the bottom it says install for system, or install in the system context if I'm targeting 2 computers. Otherwise, if I'm targeting users, install in the user's context. So install for that user. So I'll go ahead and take the defaults and let it go ahead and create my application. in this application this morning, I'm not going to create any requirement rules. I'm not going to create any dependencies. I'm just going to create the base application. It does have a detection method in it, as you saw, so it created that automatically. And then I'm going to go ahead and deploy that content, distribute the content, and deploy the application. This afternoon, I'll create requirement rules and dependencies. Okay, so here's my application. It shows me that it has one deployment type. It's not being deployed at all right now, so 0 deployments, which again, for you guys, deployments are advertisements. And it's an active application. Active meaning it's not retired. Once I'm done with an application, let's say it's a vendor I know I'm going to get rid of the application shortly with my licensing, I can retire it, which means no new people can install it. I can't deploy it anymore. And then down in the summary information, I don't have any computers or any assets with the application. It's not distributed to any distribution points yet. Here's my one deployment type. And you can see that it says it's MSI based. So MSI based. And it's no dependencies and not superseded. We'll change that later on today. And then deployments, you can see there's no deployments. I've not targeted it yet to any collections. So that's how hard it is to create an application. Now, one other thing you can do is you have the option for import application. What this option allows you to do is to go to your lab environments, and I know that when I asked you guys to raise your hand, if your lab mirrors your production environment, you're all going to raise your hands, right? Because you have a lab that exactly mirrors production. All your clients, all the operating systems, all the versions, everything. Nobody's raising your hands. Very common. Nobody's lab looks like production. But the theory is you go to the lab environment, you create your applications in the lab, you test them out in the lab, you fix all your admin-created errors in the lab, and you get it to work properly. Now, in today's environment, you have to go recreate everything in the production environment, create more admin errors because you forgot the command line switch or you forgot some configuration option, whatever, test it out, pilot it, fix it, and then deploy it to everybody. Well, now, with ConfigMgr 2012, I do my stuff in my lab environment, I got it working, I export the application from my lab environment into zip or XML or CAB, depending upon what you're exporting, import it into production environment so I don't have to recreate it. I just then deploy what I imported. So it saves you a lot of time with administrative errors. Okay, that's all we're going to do here. We're going to go back to our slides. Once I've created my application, I have to put the content on distribution points. So a couple of things on DPs. I already mentioned DP groups, that they're intelligent now. We remember what apps were deployed to the DP groups. If I add a new DP to the DP group, it gets all the apps that were previously deployed. DP groups can also be associated with collections. So again, Johan manages the servers. He's got a set of DPs that he always works with for the servers, and he's got his server collection that he targets. So now what he can do is he can associate his DPs with his collection or DP group so that whenever he then targets his collection, we automatically know which DPs to put the content on. He doesn't have to designate it anymore. We already know that association. The Distribute Content Wizard allows you to put multiple different content in a single distribution. And with a single instance store, we'll just divvy them out in the content library as appropriate for you. We can detect application dependencies. So if my application has a dependent application, and the dependent application has not been deployed yet to a distribution point, distributed to a DP, when we distribute the application, it'll distribute the dependent application as well. Same thing for task sequences. So when Johan talks later on today about OSD and task sequences, you can have a bunch of different packages that are appropriate. Once you deploy the task sequence, it automatically distributes all the packages the task sequence refers to your distribution points. Content library, single instance store, so you're only transferring stuff across the wire once, storing it once on your DP. And then bandwidth controls. We now allow you to put bandwidth controls on remote distribution points. Those allow you to control when the site server can push the content out to your distribution points. 24/7 scheduling with priorities and bandwidth limits. So you can say that when ConfigMan can push to your distribution point, it can only use 10% of the wire. And it can only do so from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., your business hours. After hours, it could use 50% of your wire because there's fewer people on the wire. So you can go ahead and control that in 24/7 scheduling. So that's for remote distribution points. So we think with that, if people have secondary sites today, they can remove their secondary sites because you have that same control with the distribution points now. You have a monitoring space, which I showed you already. In the UI, we'll see it many more times coming up shortly and throughout the day, where you can go view your package status in essence. So this is the replacement for the package status node that you have today in the console. So let's go ahead and distribute our content. Let's go to our site server. We'll take the content, and if you look down at the bottom, you see that content status is nothing. It's not distributed to any DPs. So I'm going to go to my application. I'm going to say distribute content. It says here's the application I said I wanted to distribute. Notice the bottom, it says detect associated content dependencies and add them automatically. That means if this application had a dependent application and it wasn't already distributed, it would go ahead and distribute it for me automatically. In this case, it says there aren't any dependencies, so it's only going to put this one piece of content out. I have to specify my target. I can go to a collection if I want to. I can specify individual distribution points or distribution point groups I've created. I'm going to go ahead and go to distribution point, and I'll select the individual DP. And now it tells me it's going to deploy this one piece of content to this one DP. I click next. I click close. And now, once I summarize in a moment, this value here in the details or the preview pane will change for me. So I go to the monitoring workspace. I go to my content status. Here's my content. And right now it says it's yellow, which is in progress. So my one DP is being distributed with that content right now. Up above, we tell you the type of content we have, boot images, applications, and packages, what the size of the content is, how many DPs were targeted, and my compliance percentage. And now when I refresh, my compliance percentage goes to 100. So I have physically put that content on my DP. So this is your replacement for package status. One place to go to see all your content. So very, very nice and easy. If I want more details, I just select my content, click View Status, and it's an in-console monitoring experience. It's similar to deployment status we'll see later on. Here's my success. Content was distributed successfully to one asset, and here's the asset. If there's any in progress or errors or unknown, I could click those tabs and see what the appropriate values are as well. So that's very, very simple. You can also distribute your content as part of the deploy software wizard, which I'll do this afternoon. So deployment. Now once I've got the application created, the content distributed, now I can advertise it as you guys would know, but it's now called deploy. I can deploy that content to target collections. So you still target to collections, you just don't have to put those rules on your collections anymore, because you can do that through your requirement rules and your deployment types. So I shouldn't say this because I'm being videotaped, so I'll deny it, but I can't because it's not being videotaped. And I'm going to clarify this. Theoretically, you could deploy all software to your all systems collection or your all users collection. We don't want you to do that. Don't do that. Don't go back to your office and say, Wally told me to deploy everything to all users and all systems. I'm denying that. I don't want you to do that. But theoretically, you could, and we'd only install on the appropriate computers based on your requirement rules. But you're still going to have collections based on your computers, the locations they're sitting in, and so on. But with the requirement rules, you don't have to create those complex queries anymore in your collections. Two types of deployment purposes. There's required, which you guys know is mandatory. There's available, which you guys know as optional. If you make things available to users, it appears in the application catalog. If you target things available to systems, it appears in Software Center like you saw with that program I deployed earlier. There's two types of actions on your deployment, install and uninstall. So the action is I'm installing the application or I'm uninstalling it. The purpose is it's required to install or uninstall, or it's available to install. An uninstall is always required, so you don't get to control that. Once you've created your deployment, you can go do your monitoring, which I'll show you momentarily. It's state-based, so we're not relying on status messages anymore. It's state messages. And state messages give you the final resolution. So what's the one state for this application? I'm compliant, success. I'm non-compliant, I'm in progress, I'm unknown, I've got an error state. And we'll return the state for this deployment from the client or the user. Now, if a user is targeted and the user logs on to multiple computers, we'll give you the worst case of that deployment state. If it fails at one computer, successful on another computer, we're going to show you the error state for that user with that application. And you can go drill in to see which one it errored on and then get more details. Okay, so your flow, before we go ahead and distribute this or deploy, is you receive a policy, either on demand, I forced it through the, the console, like I did before, the Configuration Manager Properties UI, or on schedule, it retrieved it. I check to see, are the requirements met? So can I physically run this application based on the requirements? If not, then we come back and report back a state of requirements not met. I can't install because I don't meet the requirements, and you can see which requirement was failing. If I do pass the requirements, then I check to see, is the application already installed? So I check my detection methods. Is the app already installed? If so, then it's not an error like it kind of indicates with the icon there. It comes back with a compliant. I'm compliant with the deployment because the application is already installed. If it's not already installed and I pass the requirements, then I check dependencies. Are there any dependencies? If there are dependencies, so if there are there any dependencies, if there are any and they're not installed, go ahead and install those dependencies. Provided that we pass the requirement rules for those dependent apps and check to see if they're already installed, which obviously if we're going to check the requirement rules, we've already validated it's not installed. So if we then install the dependencies or there aren't any, then we go ahead and it says install the application. Really it's run the deployment type, which may not be installing anything. It may just be running some command line. And then once we've done all that, we don't download any code until we get down after all the yellow. So nothing's been downloaded from the distribution point until we get down to the orange part at the bottom. Then we download the content, we install the content, we install the, run the application, whatever, and then we report back state. Absolutely. So the question is, can I create my custom requirements, including WMI? And I'll show you that. Absolutely. There's like 12 different types of attributes as far as classes. WMI, AD, SQL, WQL, IIS, XML, file system-based stuff, custom scripts. So yes, you'll see all those this afternoon. Okay, let's go ahead and deploy this application. I've got 7 minutes left in this session, so oops, let's deploy our application, which means I go over here. I go back to the software library workspace. Here's my application. And again, deployments node, it says nothing. So that hasn't been deployed. And now you can see my distribution, my content status node now says I'm 100% compliant because I did that summarization in the, I got the status back from the DP earlier. I want to go ahead and deploy the content. So I'll go to deployment. And then I have 2 different types of deployments. So you have a simulate deployment and you have a real deployment. A real deployment means take the code and try and install it on your clients. So really try to install this software, provided you meet all the things we talked about before. A simulate says evaluate the policy, but don't try to install. In other words, just come back and tell me, would I have tried to install based on the requirement rules, the detection methods, and the dependencies? So come back and tell me if I would be successful or failure. It's not going to tell you whether or not you physically could have installed the application, just whether you could have tried to install the application. So basically what this is a way to validate that you didn't goof up your requirement rules. So you got your requirement rules, your detection methods, and your dependencies configured properly. So it deploys the policy to the client evaluates requirement rules, detection method, and dependencies, and comes back with success, failure, requirements not met, basically. And then if I get back requirements not met, I go look and see, well, did I goof up my requirements? Oh yeah, I put in the wrong amount of memory, or I put in the wrong security group, or whatever. I fix that, and then once I have confidence that things are going to work, I get rid of the simulated deployment, and I create a real deployment. So I'm going to go ahead and create a real deployment, because I'm short on time. I'm always short on time. So here's my software I want to deploy. Again, I don't specify the program or the deployment type, which I only have one, but I just specify the application. I want to go ahead and target, by default, we assume you're going to users now with user-centric software. You don't have that default with packages and programs, but for applications you do. I don't have any users, as you can see here. It says 0 for my member count everywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and go to systems. And we'll do user targeting this afternoon. Still tells me 2 computers. Here it says my content is already on a distribution point, so I don't have to do any DP stuff now. My deployment settings, install or uninstall. I'm going to go ahead and install. And then my purpose is available or required. Available is optional, required is mandatory. I'm going to go ahead and make this one a required application. And then it lets me say, hey, go ahead and deploy automatically whether or not the user is logged on. So go ahead and deploy at the deadline, whether or not he's there. And then send wake up packets. That's integration with Wake on LAN. I'm not going to worry about either of those. Because it's a mandatory or required application, I have a deadline. My deadline is by default as soon as possible. Get it out there as soon as it can. I can also put a schedule in there. I want it to be installed at this date and time. And then the top one is when is the application available to be installed, not when the deadline is. Now I want it to be deployed right now, so I'm going to go and say yes. Can end users see this in the Software Center? And I'm going to take the defaults of yes. Alerts. So this is new for applications, not for packages and programs. So I can say I want to create an alert if my success compliance is not 90% after a week. So that's what my value is. So after a week's time, let me know if I'm not hit 90% of my clients successfully. And that will generate an in-console alert. And I'll show you what that looks like. Now, we're not going to be here in a week. I'm going to be back home. I don't know about you guys. So I'm going to change this to say today instead of a week's time frame. And it's not, I can't do it 1:11 because that's already in the past. So I'll say 1:15. I can also create an alert if my failures are above a certain percentage. So for those that have tried, let me know if there's failures that hit 1%, 10%, whatever your value is. And I'm not going to care about the failures. You can also say turn off Operations Manager, maintenance mode, or put you into maintenance mode so you don't look at generate OpsMan alerts because of failures, because you might be restarting and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. My target number of systems is 2. And we're all done. Now we go to the monitoring workspace. And we go to the deployments node. This is basically your advertisement status node that you have today, or the software distribution homepage dashboard in the 2007 console. And here's my application, DCM authoring tools, and it shows me I have no status. I know nothing. Nobody's given me anything back, so I know nothing at all. If I go ahead and run summarization, which will happen automatically within an hour, I'll go ahead and force it, give it a second to think, then I'll refresh. And now it tells me that my, it's the wrong one. I was going to say one's already got the policy. I was going to say that's pretty quick for somebody to retrieve policies. Now it tells me my unknown count is 2. So it analyzed or evaluated, found that there's 2 target systems in my collection. Okay, let's go over to my client computer. Let's force the client to retrieve policies. Client computer, retrieve policies. And again, I don't have to retrieve policies. I'm just doing it to shorten the time frame because I've only got a minute left. So I'm going to go over my allotted time slot in this when I talk more. You guys ask more questions than the other people have been. Yes? So the alert is going to, you designate the time when you want to do the evaluation. If you're not at that threshold by that time, it's going to generate the alert. So if you wanted to do it like a weekly evaluation, then you'd have to change your alert criteria, so the alert definition. So maybe say, I want 25% after 1 week, and then get my alert. After a week, then I modify the threshold definition to say 50% after 2 weeks. So I just have to keep manually modifying it. So now you can see that my installation is complete. And now we see here on the all programs, here's the ConfigMgr 2007 toolkit with the 3 DCM tools. And I'll show you this later on, but I'm going to uninstall those as part of an uninstall action later on today. So now the state comes back to the site through state messages, which by default are sent every 15 minutes. I've changed mine to be every 2 minutes, so sometime fairly shortly I'll get state back from this client. So let's go to the monitoring space and go to my deployment. And I'll force summarization, see if I got anything back from this client yet. Give it a moment to process. And then we'll go ahead and refresh. And potentially nothing, yes. Like I said, it could be up to 2 minutes in my case. Okay, got it back from the client. So here you can see my client state is, I got 1 success, 1 in progress, or excuse me, 1 unknown. I can click View Status and see who is the success. The success is for one asset and it's client one system. The unknown, I haven't heard anything from primary one, which is my site server, which is a client as well. But now, go to software library. I either go to the overview homepage, there's my alert, or I go to application management, and there's my alert. And the alert says, I generate an alert because your application, DCM authoring tools, is only at 50% compliance, and you told me I should be at 90% compliance now. So it generates the alert in the console. It doesn't page you, it doesn't email you, it doesn't go ringing bells in Operations Manager or anything else. You can do that integration if you want to through the SDK. But this is all our alert does. So if Johan's a software distribution guy, every morning when he comes in, he should be looking at his home page here, his dashboard, to see if there's any deployments that have alerts that have been generated on them. Now, this alert will go away when I go to my site server and I force it to run that application. So I'll have it retrieve policies. And then any moment now, I'll get the balloon above the system tray saying download, new software is required, downloading and installing software, then installation complete. And there you see it's happening. So while that's happening, it's going to take it a moment and then send in state messages. Let me go finish up my last couple of slides since I'm over time anyway. The last thing I want to do is talk about the application catalog. And then I'll install the roles, then we'll take our break, and then these guys will come up and do their stuff. So the application catalog, I showed you Software Center. Software Center is for available software targeted to computers. For available software targeted users, you don't want to go into software catalog. You want to give them a more rich experience, and that's the application catalog. It's a website they can browse to browse for applications by manufacturer, by category of applications. They can do searching, they can do filtering. You can put in web links there where they can go get more information about the application. You can have it set so that before Johan can install the application, he's got to get my approval for it. Even though I've made it available in this console, in the application catalog, he still has to get my approval to install the application. So you can configure that. So it's a website they go to for their shopping experience, as some people call it. So the flow here for the application catalog is, here's the user. It says Melissa, but we'll assume it's Johan. See, he's got the same amount of hair. Okay, maybe not. Here's his computer. He goes, loads the console, which is the application catalog, and he clicks on an application. Once he clicks on the application, the website actually connects up to his computer, evaluates some stuff on his computer, and sends that to the site server. The site server then builds a policy on the fly and sends it back down to the client. So no policies having to be retrieved here. It's created on demand for that computer. Then that policy is evaluated locally on that client computer. If it passes the requirement rules, detection method, and the dependencies, then they go ahead and try to install that application and run the deployment types. And then send back state information back to the site server through the management point. And we'll see that this afternoon. Now, there's 2 site system roles you have to install to use the catalog. So let's go ahead and install those 2 site system roles, and then we'll be all done. So let's go over to our site server. Oops, that's not the site server, that's the client. Go to the site server, and let's go do our summarization. Oh, let's get the role started first, then we'll do summarization. Give it time. So I go to my administration workspace, go to my site configuration node. Here's the list of all the sites in my hierarchy, which I'm in a standalone site, which is what the vast majority of you are going to have. I want to go ahead and look at the servers in my site. So my site systems, I have one site system, which is fairly common, but you could certainly have multiple servers that are running the different roles for Configuration Manager. In fact, you very commonly will have separate distribution points, multiple DPs in your environment. I'm going to go ahead and add a new role here, or in this case 2 roles, so add site system roles. On the main page, I'll just click next. I want to add the 2 application catalog roles. There's a web service point, which produces the stuff for the application catalog, and the website point, which is the one that the end user interacts with. For the web service point, I'm going to go ahead and use HTTP protocol over port 80. And for the website point, I'm going to use HTTP protocol over port 80, although I could use SSL if I was configured for that. The default website name is CM Application Catalog. Oops. There we go. You can see that, but you can change it if you want to. And the computer that's running the application catalog is primary 1, so I'll take that. Now you can customize. So I'll put in Stockholm deployment event. And then you can pick a color. So if you have a specific color you want the UI to display in the application catalog, you can do so. The reason we do that is we default to blue. We have two very large retailers in the United States. One happens to be blue as their color. Another one happens to be red. The red guys weren't happy that we defaulted to blue. So we gave you the ability of customizing your application catalog. So you can pick whatever color you want. If you don't like our default colors, you can go pick from default color scheme. So just so you can show it changes, I'm going to go ahead and say magenta, something different. Okay, it's going to go ahead and install those two roles. Very, very simple, quick little roles to install. If I go to my monitoring workspace and I go to my site hierarchy or system status and site status, we'll see that the roles are listed as installed and successfully. Okay, now back to our deployment, and then we'll break for lunch. Or break for break. Break for break, yeah. That's the way we talk in the United States. So you guys come visit, you got to talk like me. You don't want to do that. People laugh at you if you talk like me. Anyway, you're going to do this application. I want to do a summarization of it. Give it a moment to think, and then we'll refresh. And now my application, let me refresh again. My application should be, there we go. Both my computers are successfully installed now. And now when I go back to my software library space, you see that the alert is gone. So the alert's gone now. I can see the alert, and this is where your question for monitoring there. I can go to the alerts tab. You can see it says it is canceled. But if it was still there, I could go ahead and configure the definition of that alert, and I go ahead and change the my percentage for alerting, and by default it evaluates it on a weekly basis. I can change my threshold there for that. So, alrighty. With that, I apologize. I'm 7 minutes over, but you guys were much more interactive than the other people have been, so I talked more than I had previously. So we are on break time now. We come back from break at 10:45. So you have 22 minutes now. So thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to come on up. And again, I'll be here the rest of the day helping out.